Hello, everyone. Short sound check. Can you hear me? Good. First task solved. Thank you very much, and warm welcome from my side from Berlin. As you heard, my name is Dominik, and I'm with MM1 since 2016. And through all these 5 years, I've always been part of a team at the intersection of telecommunications and the automotive sector. My job is literally bringing the internet into the cars, and I have to say it's a quite exciting job. We all know that the in-car experience, as we experience it to now, changed rapidly, and this change heavily relies on a stable data connection between the vehicles and the mobile networks. And today I will share with you some of the experience I gained in projects like the rollout of Google Automotive Services in Europe, and I really hope for a vivid discussion at the end. Before I want to start presenting some short facts about myself, as I already said, my name is Dominik and I'm 33 years old. My wife and I, we live in Berlin, and we got to know each other in Shanghai, where I spent a research semester at Tongji University. And I experienced China as a lovely country, and I really enjoyed my time there. So I'm very thankful to be invited today and giving some of my passion for the country back to you guys. Before I joined MM1 some years ago, I worked as a research assistant at the university and as the assistant to the CEO of a travel agency. And as you can see, research and data, that's my thing. I hold 2 master degrees. And this year I graduated from the executive program of MIT for artificial intelligence. So enough about me, because I think you want to hear more about the implications of telco regulation and the future of connected cars. So today, when I will speak about the topic, it's always at the intersection of telco industry and automotive sector. The point I present mainly developed from my perspective on the side of the mobile network operator, where I mostly work. And we, together with the mobile network operator, we provide guidance to our automotive clients. In the past, I experienced the clients on the automotive side as real car guys. All was about horsepower and strong engines. But I feel that this view changes, and let me explain why. Next slide, please. So this view changes due to 4 reasons I want to point out. First, we have the in-car experience. So when a consumer grabs their phone or their tablet, they are used to a great digital customer experience. Every service is easily accessible and is easy to navigate. And if I was a consumer and I buy a device that's factor 50 or 100 more expensive than my phone, I surely expect the same convenience of that service when it comes to digital experience. And the core element to provide such a digital experience and digital services like video streaming or gaming in the cars is the connectivity. Second, you know better than I that today's revenue models already rely strongly on smart usage of data. This development will only intensify in the future. In-car data is crucial for a better customer service, for adding additional digital services, and is a key information for your research and development department. To transfer this data to your own service in real time is dependent on a stable data connection. And last, we all know how essential data connectivity is to enable the future of self-driving cars. Real-time communication between the cars or the vehicles and the surrounding infrastructure is no utopia, it's our future. And this will all be no information to you, but it strengthens my argument that it's not about horsepower anymore. And this brings also MM1 into the game. Can you show the next slide? Thank you. So MM1 is a consultancy with connectivity at its heart. For more than 10 years, we continuously involved in projects with vehicle manufacturers, which are related to the topic of connected cars. We supported many connected cars projects, and we are part of stories which connected over 3 million cars with mobile networks. We gained insights from many European companies, and Volker shared some of this experience already with you. So I just used the term connected car. Let me shortly point out what I mean now when I speak about connected car services to you. So as a consultant, of course, I brought a 2x2 matrix with me today, and which should help us to structure this term. So first, when I speak about this topic, I always ask myself, do I speak about an in-car or an out-of-car service? And the second question I always pose myself, is it a software-based service or is it a hardware-based service? So for example, as a software-based service that's out of the car, I would say it's an over-the-air software update. Hardware-based services comprise topics like virtual vehicle upgrades or the transfer of operating and maintaining data. All these services are surely exciting, and I'm sure you have great plans with that. But my points will focus and circle around software-based services which have an in-car relation. I'm talking about things like transfer of media data or IP-based communication. All the services I'm referring to are accessible through the vehicle's own infotainment or operating system, and they are realized via a SIM card that's installed in the car. Mostly, we are talking about a dual RPN scenario where one APN is used to transfer your telematic data, and the other one will be used to transfer the data connected to B2C services. So I'm not talking about mirroring cases like Apple CarPlay or Android Moto, and I'm also not talking about cases where we rely on consumer SIMs. So for the last 5 years, I help my clients to build, plan, and run connected car services, and now let's dive into the topic. Perfect, next slide was correctly. So in my first project 5 years ago, a vehicle manufacturer wanted to offer its customers more digital service in their cars. So they were thinking to provide streaming options, Wi-Fi-based internet access, messaging, all this kind of stuff. But they had one fear, that such services would put them into a position that they shall be considered as a telecommunication service provider. Here in Europe, telecommunication service providers have to deal with a lot of requirements and obligations, and no manufacturer is really keen to deal with them. So the manufacturer asked their mobile network partner to help them out, and my job was to plan and run a Europe-wide feasibility study. We wanted to understand how the digital in-car services are considered from a regulatory perspective, and we wanted a comprehensive overview of the requirements connected to such service provision. So I gathered many legal and regulatory experts, and we created a unique questionnaire that comprises 60 questions. And these questionnaires were distributed to law firms here in 23 countries and were assessed by law experts in detail. In the end, we evaluated the answers of the law firms and translated them into technical and organizational requirements. Now, for all involved parties, we had an overview, how are the services considered from a regulatory perspective and what requirements are connected to them. Let's get a bit more clearer and see what was the result of this feasibility study. So most national regulators throughout Europe will consider this connected car service as a so-called electronic communication service, which I will call ECS in the following. An ECS is a service normally provided for remuneration and consists mainly or wholly of the conveyance of electronic signals. Please note that remuneration does not necessarily mean that your customer needs to pay you some money. It might also be possible that you receive some data you can use to strengthen your business, or that you can demand higher prices for your car because of a higher willingness to pay. Furthermore, one might argue that conveyance of signals need to be understood in a contractual way rather than a technical one. So even if you and your colleagues are not transferring any radio signals from a technical point of view, you have to have a very clear contractual understanding that's shared by all involved parties. So it's really in the best interest for any manufacturer that that it's possible that you might be considered an ECS provider and that there are many requirements connected to it. Let me shortly point out what requirements could this be. So on the left side, you will find the point of licensing. So most regulators will oblige the ECS provider to register with the national telco authority. And the process, as I know it from all my project experience, like setting up internet access services in over 20 countries, is quite heterogeneous. In some countries, you can easily register through an online form on a website, and in other countries, you will face an intense application process. For example, in Portugal, this is a very intense process, and we had several calls with the Portuguese authorities, and it took several months to be ready to launch the services. We had to hand in a lot of documents, such pointing out our customer care concept or technical descriptions of our services. Other relevant point will be the design of your IT systems, which we already heard in Volker's talk. So processing telecommunications related data is a very sensitive topic, and you have to be sure and aware of all the requirements which are stemming from security and counterterrorism law. Sometimes, like for example in Greece, it's not permissible that you store telecommunications data on servers outside of the country. The same counts, for example, for Poland, where you will find these requirements, and to gain exemptions from these requirements is a long and painful process. For Poland, it took us over a year to be exempt from this requirement, and it was only possible because in our network, we found a very experienced partner from Poland with a lot of legal and regulatory experience who helped us out, that we were saving some money on building IT infrastructure in Poland. Last, I want to point out is the business processes that you have to establish. And the most challenging one is that you need to install gateways to law enforcement agencies. So telecommunications data plays a very important role today in police investigations, and you will be obliged to set up a gateway, or not you, the ECS provider to be more precisely, will be required to set up such a gateway. And it's very difficult because sometimes the people who operate these gateways will need special security assessments or similar. Yeah, this is only the top of the iceberg, and it's not possible to list all the requirements. I just wanted to give you a short overview what might be connected to the provision of ECS. So let me just point out what happens if you do not comply with such requirements. The answer to this is it depends. First, it depends on the fact if the authority detects your behavior and concludes it's a violation of the law. If yes, then it's most likely that you have the opportunity to take a stand and to point out your view to the things. And if the authority will not follow your argumentation, then you will have a limited amount of time to ensure compliance with this legislation. Therefore, it will be also essential that the authority does not gain the impression you violated the regulation on intention. In one of my projects, I was confronted with the situation that the authority concluded our setup did not comply with the legislation, and we received a note with a deadline until when we had to ensure compliance. And due to our release cycles, it was not possible to meet this deadline. So we entered into quite strong discussions with the authority, and in the end, together, we found a constructive solution. So to sum it up, it's very important to ensure the compliance and to avoid any financial or legal risks deriving from telco regulation. Nevertheless, I personally experienced all the authorities very constructive because, of course, they have an interest that you pursue business opportunities in their jurisdiction. Yeah, so next slide. So now we heard ECS is a topic, and how shall we approach this topic? There are actually three approaches you can observe in the European business context. First, the companies, they ignore the situation, although they might be aware of it, and provide the services without taking the requirements into account. They will just see what's going to happen. It's very rare, but there are companies who do so, who act so. Second one is they acknowledge the situation and they try to comply with the requirements themselves. It's only rare because very complicated, but I also know manufacturers who act so. And the last one, that's the very common approach, is you try to outsource this risk to your mobile network operator, and the mobile network operator shall take over all of this risk we just experienced about. And the third approach, I have the most experience, so I want to show you some insights about that. So wonderful picture. Here you can see me and my team who was responsible for the rollout of Google Automotive services in Europe. So we work on the side of the mobile network operator to enable the connectivity for the vehicle fleets, which rely on the Google Automotive operating system. Google Automotive operating system is the middleware that car makers use to offer a modern in-car experience. And the project was super cool and very exciting, but it was the first one where the guidelines of telco regulation clearly crashed strongly with the interest of the car makers. So the car maker didn't really think about the telco regulation might be an issue, and they were just thinking, hey, customers can jump into the cars and start driving. Well, this didn't happen. And since the manufacturer wanted that the MNO deals with all the applications from telco law, we installed multiple companies in multiple countries which provide the connectivity from to the end customer and shield the manufacturer from all these obligations. Let me show how this solution looks like. Can you press once more? There's something missing. Yeah, thanks. On this website, you can see this what we did in the project. It's nothing confidential. If you want to check it in more detail, just search the internet for Hotspot Drive. So as I said, we installed a company that acts as an internet service provider to the end users. So we built its own website and we are running this website, and this website and all this is just to set up to shield the manufacturer from these obligations. So in other words, it sounds possible that you just outsource all your risks to the MNO, and this sounds quite attractive to you maybe, but unfortunately this comes with a price to pay, and let me show you in the next slide what I'm talking about. So the price you will pay is a rather complicated and cost-intensive customer journey. If you want to shield as a car maker yourself from the obligations, you need to install an internet service provider, and all solutions I know work more or less like the one I'm showing now. The person who wants to use the service must register on an extra website, and there's a person, and this person needs to create a customer account, needs to consent to legal documents, and all this stuff. And the tricky thing about this is that this process might vary from country to country. You cannot just find one process and roll it out in all countries. You need to take the various legislation into context. So in some countries, it might be possible that, like shown here, customer just accepts the legal documents and consents and can go online. In other countries, might be necessary that the customer provides some personal data. And in other countries, it's even necessary to verify this data. For example, in the course of a video-based identification process and an SMS-based identification process. So it's rather complicated, all this. And of course, all of this is doable and possible, but it might get into conflict what you and your colleagues consider a convenient and easy customer journey. So let me shortly brief up what I want to say for today. So from a European perspective, I think we are at the beginning of an in-car entertainment revolution. The digital services will become more and more important, and you need to ensure a stable data connection between your cars and the mobile networks. And my personal view is that the legislators are still unsure how to address this topic of connected cars, but the legislation gets clearer and clearer. And as I pointed out, it's undeniable from today's perspective in Europe that these services are affected by regulation. And the question unanswered is which party has to comply with these requirements connected to the regulation. And I can only strongly recommend you to consider all these aspects and to discuss it when you start planning connectivity and all this with your management. Involve legal experts from the beginning in your product planning, that your development guys and your IT really knows what to build and how to use your resources efficiently. And quite good legal expertise, which comes for free, more or less, can always be found on the side of your MNO. So when you discuss things with your MNO and you get into contact with your counterparts, try to gain as much insights as possible and discuss everything very, very intense with them. So let me give you some tips what to discuss with them when it comes down to connectivity. So when you plan your connectivity setup with your MNO, make sure that you understand which network profile the MNO wants to use. Gain really understanding what are the underlying roaming agreements of this network profiles and which countries are covered by these agreements. ask your MNO really in detail if the connected services in Europe can be tested from China, how this works, and if some additional requirements have to be met. Make really clear to the MNO what matters for you when it comes to the product experience for your customers. Today, I've shown you a solution which minimizes regulatory risks for you as a car maker, but it results in a rather complicated customer journey. So really discuss a future-proven customer journey with them together and make clear that everyone has the same understanding what you want. And don't underestimate this legal and regulatory implications. Maybe it's not the most important topic on your plate, but it's a very relevant topic with a lot of impact. And as I pointed out, connectivity lays at the heart of your future. So I know this was a lot of information here on the last slide run. You can find our contact details. If you want to get into contact with us, reach out. I'm very happy to answer your questions. Or if you have questions right now, just drop them. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much that I was invited today.
Thank you very much, Dominik, for sharing this. So for time for the audience, do you have any question now for Dominik regarding to the connected cars and the regulatory regarding to the telco? I think nothing from the chart I have here now. There's no questions specifically. So I would say, please feel free to reach out to Dominik or to Volker if you have any question regarding to this. And